What's good, everybody? It's the Real AG coming back at you on the Lockdown Defense Sports Network. And with week one of the NFL regular season in the books, you know what time it is. Time to drop my weekly segment we are calling Kingdom Keys with the Real AG. First and foremost, Kingdom, we all know it was not a promising or exciting week one for the Kansas City Chiefs. Um, you know, not coming out with the dub against a division opponent. But we will recap that. And as a famous coach once notoriously said, we are moving on to week two, or, we are on to Philadelphia. But let's just get right into it, ladies and gentlemen. As everyone knows, Chiefs ended up losing to the Chargers Friday night in Brazil, 27-21. It was a pretty look, we knew it was going to be a hard fought AFC West matchup. Kansas City undoubtedly came out very, very flat. They definitely picked things up in the second half, and it just ended up not being, enough to get the win at the end of the day. And I think that's going to be kind of how every AFC West game is going to go. All those teams have been making moves to build their rosters to beat the Chiefs, and we're finally starting to see the finished product of that, if you will, with our divisional rivals here. But, just kind of looking at the stat lines, Mahomes was 24 for 39, 258, one touchdown, no pick, sacked twice. Also was the leading rusher. A good or bad thing? Probably bad, but with 6 carries, 57 yards, and a touchdown. The leading receiver of the day was Hollywood Brown. He had 10 receptions, 99 yards, 16 targets. Kelsey, our boy Kelsey, even though he was relatively quiet most of the game, he did have 2 catches for 47 yards and a tutty. Chiefs defense was not too much to write home about, but they did have 3 sacks and made some plays to make it a game when it needed to be made. But ultimately, the Chargers and Justin Herbert just outdueled Mahomes and the Chiefs. Kudos to them for doing that. Streak always has to be broken, and like I said, these AFC West games are always close. So it is what it is. And like I said, we're moving on to Philadelphia. But just looking back, it was a rough game overall for Kansas City in all 3 phases. The defense struggled to generate pressure, had multiple coverage miscues. Chargers played very well situational football. Herbert was put in a lot of positions to success and, to succeed, I should say. And they just kept their drives going and kept the Chiefs defense on the field and put points on the board. So it's just aggravating day for a Chiefs fan. Looking at the offense, like I said, it just lacked explosiveness. They looked very flat. It's just sloppy to start the game. In fact, punted on their first 3 possessions. Worthy getting hurt, third play of the game, definitely hampered the game plan. But good teams know how to adjust, and KC did adjust in the second half, but it was too little, too late at that point. With losing Worthy as early as they did, and just not being able to recoup in the first half, and just yeah, it was a rough game. Would have hated or just hate that we saw the same issues that happened, towards the end of last year and in the Super Bowl rear their ugly head again in week one after they've had a whole offseason of hearing that their dynasty's over. They're not going to win anything else. Philly embarrassed them, and it's just disheartening that they came out and did the same stuff. But I guess just to perfectly put a bow on the offensive woes in the first half, the Chiefs had more penalties than points in the first half and were 0 for 7 on their third down. So not a good recipe for success there. Offensive line still looks incomplete. Kingsley Sumamatea gave up a lot of pressures. Josh Simmons, I thought, looked pretty good. And Juwan Taylor is already in midseason form with his penalties and holdings. So, yeah, it's just a tough game for Kansas City. Just a lot of mischaracteristic issues, miscues, and things you hope that they clear up and move on from and come out in a better tone-setting manner week 2 against Philly. But with all that being said, there were some positives to the game. Like I said, the second half adjustments ultimately did give them a chance to win. They, scored on their final 5 possessions of the game. And, you know, like I said, I mean, we're put in a position to win. Herbert had to seal the game, which he did. So credit to them. But for all that happened terribly in the first half, it is at least a good sign that they were able to make adjustments and make it a game. Just unfortunately, going 1 for 3 in the red zone with touchdown efficiency and missing an extra point ultimately, played a factor in the outcome being what it was. But that's a big positive. Mahomes is still Superman. Just he can only wear so much of the cape, but he definitely sprinkled his magic over this game and at least gave us a glimmer of hope that they were going to do what they've done a lot in the past and figure out a way and find a way to win the game when it's all said and done. But it is what it is. Week 1, and we're moving on. And I also want to shout out. They perfectly ran fireman drill field goal at the end of the half to go into halftime. That was just executed to perfection. You got to give a shout out to Andy Reid, Dave Tube, and just the coaching staff, because like I said in our off-screen chat, I mean, that is a sign of a perfectly coach team and a team that is on the same page, at least in special teams, to know what they need to do. And it is a little bit of a kick in the nuts that Bucker was able to go out and do that, but then shivved an extra point, when they really needed it. But yeah, so that's week 1. That is the Chiefs' loss to the Chargers. And like I said, we are moving on to week 2. So see ya. We'll see you in week 9, I believe, in Arrowhead. Chargers. But looking ahead to week 2 against the Philadelphia Eagles, just a quick recap on the injury report, or the most up to date status that we have so far. I'm recording this on Wednesday. It is dropping on Thursday, so there may be some more news in the meantime. But so far, the only 2 people that did not practice as of Wednesday were Jalen Royals and Xavier Worthy. Jalen Royals was a little hampered last week as well. He's just dealing with some knee tendonitis. And then Xavier Worthy, obviously, out for all of game 1, essentially diagnosed with a dislocated shoulder. But I will say, Reed's being relatively ambiguous and short about updates on his status, mainly just saying that he is rehabbing and progressing as he can. But he did at least confirm, regardless of how short it was or not, that they are not considering surgery for Xavier Worthy right now, nor placing him on the IR or reserve list. So those are positive things. At least tells me they're trying to see if they can get him to play, maybe not this week, but in week 3. And he's was undoubtedly a big piece of this offense, and you could tell the game plan was just sort of shot in the foot almost immediately with him going down, getting hurt on that crossing route, running into Kelsey. But with that being said, I think it is a good sign, at least, that they are relatively healthy. There's no other issues across the board, and these are just the 2 guys that we got to monitor, for week 2. And looking at the upcoming matchup, we got Eagles versus Chiefs in Arrowhead. So a little Super Bowl rematch, at least on our home turf this time. And a quick recap to the status of the Eagles injuries right now. The only person as of, again, Wednesday that did not practice for them was Dallas Goedert, the tight end, who was out with a knee sprain. So certainly want to monitor that, as, the tight end position is certainly, been the Achilles heel of this Chiefs defense at times, just in those intermediate coverages with the linebackers and some mismatches there. And I think that, would play to the Chiefs' favor if Goddard's undoubtedly out, for week 2. So looking at my kingdom keys for the victory, for the Chiefs' victory, and I will note, I did say on our Lockdown Defense live show on Tuesday, check it out if you haven't, that I think the Eagles could win the game, and I still will stand to that. I mean, this will be a very close game. I don't think it's going to be a rehash, if you will, of the Super Bowl with the Eagles jumping up to a huge lead and the Chiefs, I guess, as the national media would like to represent, just scoring a bunch in garbage time to make it look closer. I think this will be a hard-fought, close game down to the final possession. I just don't see it being how the Super Bowl ended up. And, my ultimate prediction here on the Kingdom Keys is I'm going to predict a 22-21 Chiefs victory in home at Arrowhead. And, my ultimate keys are one, they need to control the Eagles' rushing attack. And that may be stating the obvious to some degree, but I mean, Philly undoubtedly relies on Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts in a power rushing scheme. So, that front seven, the front interior linemen, the front D line, they're going to have to assert themselves early. They're going to have to get interior pressure. They're going to have to stuff the run, and they're gotta have to, need to force the Eagles into passing situations. That's just that has to be established early and often throughout the game. And something we did see in week one, the Chiefs were at least efficient in stopping the run. They've, honestly always kind of been pretty good against the run in this Spags era as the DC. And they're definitely going to need to do that here Sunday against the Eagles and Saquon. Another key is disguise coverage and pressure Hurts. Hurts is notably vulnerable as a QB when he's holding on to the ball too long and thinking a little too much about what decision he needs to make. And we know Spags loves the blitz. We know Spags likes to disguise his blitzing, so he is going to have to deploy that early and often to disguise the coverages, cue up timely blitzes to disrupt Hurts's rhythm and just force mistakes, because he looked too comfortable in the game against Dallas. Whether stuff wasn't open, he had open rushing lanes to make plays happen with his feet, or vice versa if there were just blown coverages. So just overall, they're going to have to get into his face early and often so they can contain the rushing lanes, but also just speed up his cerebral clock and force mistakes. And this also, I think, ultimately helps by disguising coverages and bringing timely blitzes. Undoubtedly will help with controlling the rushing attack of the Eagles. My next two are kind of two-pronged or play off of each other, and that's, protect Mahomes and establish a run game. I mean, they just have to be better up front, not even just because of who they're playing with the Eagles. We know have a stacked interior D-line. Edge rush, little shaky after week one, but they did go out and sign to Zadarius Smith, and I'd imagine, we'll probably have some creative thing queued up to get some more pressure like they did in the Super Bowl. So, that offensive line is going to have to play better, especially left guard Kingsley Sumamatea. I mean, he was an open gate at various times in the game against the Chargers. So, they got to just keep Mahomes clean and let him be in the pocket, examine the field, and make the right play, make the right read. And, I think if they're also in turn more married to the running game in this game against Philly, that will help defenses not just tee off as much and drop back in coverage. Because, frankly, the Chargers did not really have to honor a rushing attack by Kansas City. I mean, outside of Mahomes, they had 10 carries total between Pacheco and Kareem Hunt, which is just not what you need, not what you want when you are trying to, maintain possession and just keep defenses on their toes. And, like I said, not just let them drop six back and say, have at it. So, definitely need to do both of those things. In turn, they also need to capitalize on explosive plays or just create more explosive plays. And I think that is something I've been saying constantly, like a broken record here for the past couple seasons. But KC they're gonna have to ignite momentum with big plays. It's just it has to be done, especially against a team like Philadelphia, and it's gonna have to be done either downfield, which we did at least see them try to attempt a little bit more in week one, taking some shots to Thornton and Hollywood Brown. And they're also going to have to create some big explosive plays 3 yards after the catch. That'll just ultimately help tilt the field position and just establishing a dominance in time of possession and keeping the ball out of Hurts, Saquon, and Philly's offense's hands. And also, I believe that establishing a run game, again, will help set up explosive plays, because you won't see the defense just dropping six back and chilling and just, creating turnovers, kind of like we saw Philly do in the Super Bowl. So they definitely are going to have to do that, and then lean on special teams and win field position is my final key to victory, or the kingdom key for the Chiefs to beat the Eagles on Sunday. That's through Butker's leg, Ariza's punts, and some dynamic returns from Brashard Smith, who I thought looked pretty solid as a kick returner, and Remigio, who had some decent punt returns as well. But that undoubtedly will give KC a subtle edge, a subtle advantage in field position, time of possession, controlling the field, which would in turn limit Philly's offensive rhythm and just, opens up more scoring opportunities. So that is my kingdom keys, ladies and gentlemen, for our week 2 matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles. Like I said, it is going to be a hard-fought game. It is a game that, if I'm being objective, if I'm being realistic, I could see the Eagles winning it too. I'll say this: if KC comes out and plays the same type of football they played in the first half against the Chargers, it's going to be a long day for the kingdom. So fingers crossed that Andy Reid, coming off of a loss, coming off of somewhat of an embarrassing loss, gets this team right, plans accordingly with who they have available, and we see a totally different offense, a motivated offense, in the first half and the whole game here against Philadelphia. But that's the Kingdom Keys, ladies and gentlemen. As always, if you want to get at me or any of our other Lockdown Defense insiders, there's our info for social media. If you like this video and want to find more Lockdown Defense sports content, boom, we are anywhere and everywhere your smartphone will take you. And as always, please like the video, comment below, and subscribe to the channel. But in the meantime, in between time, how about those Chiefs?